Buying meat has become pretty expensive where I'm at, and I'm sure it has for you too. The good news is, with a little bit of patience and effort, you can save hundreds on meat this year, if not even more. So let's get into it. First, you'll need a sharp, non-serrated knife. Make sure to choose a knife that feels comfortable in your hand, and has a blade large enough to get through your chosen piece of meat. You'll also need a way to clean and sanitize your work surface before and after cutting meat. When disinfecting your work surface, be sure to follow the directions on the back of your disinfectant. They can vary quite a bit by brand. You'll also need a way to seal your meat before freezing. Here I have a chamber vacuum sealer that I've been really impressed with. The bags it uses are significantly cheaper than the channel vacuum sealer bags you might be familiar with. I haven't run into a single issue with mine over 2 years of heavy use, and you can buy large packs of pre-cut bags that take me forever to get through. The massive downside to these, though, is that they're really expensive. Now, I think they're worth the investment, but you absolutely don't need one for this project. A smaller channel vacuum sealer is a fraction of the price and will do a great job. Also, you can seal your meat pretty well just by using gallon freezer bags and the water displacement method, which I'll cover here in a little bit. There are 8 primal cuts of beef: the chuck, the rib, the round, the flank, the plate, the brisket, the shank, and the loin. From there, most primal cuts can be further divided into sub-primal cuts before being portioned and sold. I would recommend finding a sub-primal cut that you can cut steaks and roasts from. It's by far the easiest way to start. For example, I'll be using this whole strip loin. In any larger vacuum-sealed cut of meat, you're probably going to have juices build up. I like to open the bag over a sink to make sure that I don't spill these everywhere. But as a reminder, if you do this, make sure to sanitize your sink after. I live in an area that produces a lot of beef, so I've had good luck sourcing sub-primal and primal cuts from my local grocery store, which for me is King Soopers. However, you can also check availability from stores like Costco or Sam's Club, or if you know your local butcher, talk to them about what they might be willing to offer you. That does bring me to my next point though, which is price. For me, the whole goal of breaking down larger cuts of beef is to save money. Patience is key here, because if you're paying the exact same price per pound as you would be when buying an individual steak, you're not saving any money at all. I like to keep an eye on larger cuts around the holidays, as they're usually on sale. For example, I paid $6.99 per pound for this strip loin, which is likely half of what I'd normally pay. The downside to buying larger cuts of expensive meats such as beef is that even though the cost per pound is much less than you'd normally pay, you're buying a much larger quantity. So keep that in mind before rushing to your nearest grocery store. After opening the package and moving your meat to your work surface, there's probably still going to be some moisture. I like to use a few paper towels to absorb as much extra moisture as I can. There's no need to pat the surface completely dry, but it is nice to get as much excess off as you can. To divide this strip loin up, first I'll square off the ends. I'm going to move these to the freezer for a bit to firm up before thinly slicing. Now, you'll notice that there's quite a bit of extra fat on this cut. I'm going to do my best to remove a reasonable amount, and I'll save any excess for rendering beef tallow later. But, as you can see, I'm not a butcher. If you plan on processing meat at home, mistakes are going to happen, and that's completely okay. Remember that the goal here is to save money, not get a perfect looking steak every single time. Just like with anything else, you're going to get better with practice. After squaring off the ends of my strip loin, I'm now ready to cut it into final portions. Keep your knife as straight as possible and use long, continuous cuts when slicing. It might take more than one cut to get through your piece of beef, and that's completely fine. Just take your time and be sure to line up your knife on the cut you made before. This is USDA choice beef, which isn't the highest grade possible, but even so, this strip loin is really well marbled. I've cut one half of my strip loin into 2 2-pound roasts, but the other half I'll cut into steaks. Because I'm cutting these myself, I get to decide how big they are. These are a little over 1 inch thick and they ended up weighing about a pound each. I'm also going to trim these a little bit, adding any excess fat to the pile that I made earlier. Those end pieces have been hanging out in the freezer for about an hour now, and that means they're much easier to slice. I'll individually portion this sliced beef before sealing so that I can use it for a variety of meals. But let's get on to sealing. First, you're going to want to label your bag with the contents and the date at a minimum. I've found that including the weight on the label is great practice. It takes just a little bit more time, and it helps you know exactly what you're pulling out of your freezer. First up for sealing is the water displacement method I mentioned at the beginning of the video. For this, you'll just need a freezer bag and a container large enough to submerge your filled bags. Carefully lower your filled bag into the water, pressing down around the contents to release as much air as you can. Then, just seal the bag. This creates a pretty good seal overall, and it'll help your meat keep longer in the freezer. But if you want a fantastic seal, I would again recommend a vacuum sealer. With the chamber vacuum sealer I use, I found that meat keeps well for a year or longer in the freezer with little to no difference in taste or texture. But there you have it. For this strip loin, I ended with 4 1-pound steaks and 1 half-pound steak, about 2 pounds of thinly sliced beef, and 2 2-pound roasts. I also ended up with a couple pounds of fat, which I'm super excited to render into tallow and use when cooking everything else you see here. I'll include links below to some great resources and all of the products I've mentioned in the video if you're interested. But most of all, happy cooking.